NM cable or non-metallic sheath cable can be used to wire a tux for drop-in fixture under specific conditions. The key determining factors are the temperature ratings of the fixture and the ballast. Firstly, the fixture itself must be rated for use with NM cable. This information is typically found on a label or in the manufacturer's instructions for the fixture. If the fixture is not rated for NM cable, using it would be a violation of electrical codes and could pose a safety hazard. Secondly, the ballast, which is the component that regulates the current to the fluorescent lamps, must have a temperature rating of 90 degrees Celsius. This rating indicates the maximum temperature the ballast can safely operate at. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, addresses conductor temperature ratings and their suitability for specific applications. The NEC generally requires that conductors be rated for the temperature they will be exposed to in their application. In the context of fluorescent fixtures, this means that the conductors supplying power to the ballast must be rated for the temperature near the ballast. The NEC recognizes that the area within 3 inches of a ballast can experience elevated temperatures. Therefore, if the wiring is within this 3-inch zone, it must be rated for 90 degrees Celsius. However, if the wiring is further than 3 inches from the ballast, a lower temperature rated conductor may be acceptable, provided it meets the other requirements of the electrical code. It is important to note that NM cable typically has a temperature rating of 90 degrees Celsius for the conductors themselves, but the overall cable assembly may be rated lower, such as 60 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Celsius. This lower rating applies to the ampacity of the cable, which is the maximum current it can safely carry. Therefore, even if the conductors in the NM cable are rated for 90 degrees Celsius, the cable must be sized according to its overall temperature rating to ensure it does not overheat. To determine whether an NM cable is suitable for a specific tux for drop-in fixture, you must carefully review the manufacturer's instructions for both the fixture and the ballast. These instructions will provide information on the acceptable wiring methods and temperature ratings. If the fixture is rated for NM cable and the ballast is rated for 90 degrees Celsius, then NM cable can be used, ensuring that the ampacity of the cable is suitable for the load. If the fixture is not rated for NM cable, or if the ballast has a lower temperature rating, then an alternative wiring method must be used. Some common alternative wiring methods include using conduit with individual conductors rated for the appropriate temperature, or using armored cable, also known as AC cable, which may have a high temperature rating. Always consult with a qualified electrician if you are unsure about the correct wiring method for a particular fixture. Electrical work can be dangerous, and it is important to follow all applicable codes and regulations to ensure a safe and reliable installation. In addition to the temperature ratings, it is also important to consider the ampacity of the wiring. The ampacity is the maximum current that a conductor can safely carry without overheating. The ampacity of an NM cable is determined by its size and temperature rating. The NEC provides tables that list the ampacities of different sizes of NM cable at various temperature ratings. When selecting an NM cable for a tux for drop-in fixture, you must ensure that the ampacity of the cable is sufficient to handle the load of the fixture. The load of the fixture is the amount of current that it draws when operating. This information is typically found on a label on the fixture or in the manufacturer's instructions. If the ampacity of the cable is not sufficient to handle the load of the fixture, the cable could overheat and potentially cause a fire. In addition to the temperature and ampacity ratings, it is also important to consider the physical protection of the wiring. NM cable is not suitable for use in areas where it is subject to physical damage. If the wiring is exposed to physical damage, it should be protected by conduit or other means. It is also important to ensure that the wiring is properly supported and secured. NM cable should be supported at intervals not exceeding 4½ feet and within 12 inches of boxes, cabinets, and fittings. This will help to prevent the wiring from sagging or becoming damaged. When working with electrical wiring, it is always important to follow safe work practices. Always turn off the power to the circuit before working on any wiring. Use insulated tools and wear appropriate personal protective equipment, such as gloves and safety glasses. If you are not comfortable working with electrical wiring, it is best to hire a qualified electrician to do the work for you. Electrical work can be dangerous, and it is important to take all necessary precautions to ensure your safety. In summary, to determine if an M cable can be used for tools for drop-in fixture, firstly, verify that the fixture is specifically rated for use with an M cable according to its manufacturer's instructions. Secondly, confirm that the ballast within the fixture is rated for a temperature of 90 degrees Celsius. Thirdly, ensure the NM cable's ampacity meets or exceeds the fixture's load requirements as specified on its label. Fourthly, ensure the NM cable is not exposed to physical damage and is properly supported and secured according to electrical code. If all of these conditions are met, then the use of an NM cable is generally acceptable. However, always consult the latest edition of the National Electrical Code, or NEC, and local electrical codes for specific requirements and interpretations in your area. The NEC provides detailed guidelines on wiring methods, conductor sizing, overcurrent protection, and other aspects of electrical installations. Local codes may have additional requirements or restrictions that must be followed. It is also important to note that electrical codes are constantly evolving, so it is essential to stay up to date on the latest changes. The NEC is typically updated every 3 years, and local codes may be updated more frequently. By staying informed about the latest codes and regulations, you can ensure that your electrical work is safe and compliant. If you are unsure about any aspect of electrical wiring, it is always best to consult with a qualified electrician. A qualified electrician has the knowledge and experience to perform electrical work safely and correctly. They can also help you to ensure that your electrical installation complies with all applicable codes and regulations. Remember, electrical work can be dangerous, and it is important to take all necessary precautions to protect yourself and others. If you are not comfortable working with electrical wiring, it is best to leave it to the professionals. When selecting an M cable, it is also important to consider the type of insulation used on the conductors. The most common type of insulation used on an M cable is thermoplastic high heat resistant nylon coated, or THHN. THHN insulation is rated for 90 degrees Celsius in dry locations and 75 degrees Celsius in wet locations. It is also resistant to moisture, oil, and chemicals. Another type of insulation that is sometimes used on an M cable is cross-linked polyethylene, or XLPE. XLPE insulation is rated for 90 degrees Celsius in both dry and wet locations. It is also more resistant to heat and abrasion than THHN insulation. When selecting an M cable, it is important to choose a cable with the appropriate type of insulation for the application. If the cable will be exposed to moisture, oil, or chemicals, it is important to choose a cable with insulation that is resistant to these substances. It is also important to consider the voltage rating of the NM cable. The voltage rating is the maximum voltage that the cable can safely carry. An M cable is typically rated for 600 volts. This is sufficient for most residential and commercial applications. However, if you are using an M cable in an application where the voltage is higher than 600 volts, you will need to use a different type of cable. When installing an M cable, it is important to follow all applicable codes and regulations. An M cable should be supported at intervals not exceeding 4½ feet and within 12 inches of boxes, cabinets, and fittings. The cable should also be protected from physical damage. An M cable should not be installed in areas where it is subject to moisture, oil, or chemicals unless it is specifically rated for these conditions. When connecting an M cable to boxes, cabinets, and fittings, it is important to use the appropriate connectors. The connectors should be designed for use with an M cable and should provide a secure and watertight connection. It is also important to ensure that the conductors are properly terminated. The conductors should be stripped to the correct length and properly inserted into the terminals. The terminal should be tightened to the manufacturer's specifications. When working with electrical wiring, it is always important to follow safe work practices. Always turn off the power to the circuit before working on any wiring. Use insulated tools and wear appropriate personal protective equipment such as gloves and safety glasses. If you are not comfortable working with electrical wiring, it is best to hire a qualified electrician to do the work for you.